Last time on Journey to the West, a fated confrontation centuries in the making finally boiled over in the Mountain of Flames. Sun Wukong battled his bovine brother, the Bull Demon King, in a terrifying clash of absolute power, striving to win the sacred fan capable of extinguishing the final embers of the Monkey King's greatest crime. The armies of heaven poured out in force to fight alongside the sage they once strove to imprison, but Sun had grown far beyond his fabled rampage through heaven, and with the aid of the friends he made along the way, the Bull Demon King was at long last defeated, and our heroes were once more free to continue their journey to the west. So our heroes are trekking westward, and after the thrilling culmination of the Bull Demon King's family dynamic of doom, the journey has fallen back into a rather predictable formula. Demons threaten innocent kingdoms with untold injustices and pointless suffering, our heroes smack them around until they stop. Tripitaka gets a little bit kidnapped, Sun Wukong swoops in to save the day. Mountains are full of problems, punching them is a solution. With the entire army of heaven on speed dial and the tacit support of every bodhisattva that's ever lived, there are only so many ways the universe can complicate our hero's simple westward journey, and it's starting to feel like it might be running out of ideas. Still, the universe gives it the old college try, and one last mountain towers in the road, peaks scraping the heavens themselves. But Sun is clearly all out of patience with mountains because he doesn't even dignify it with punching. He just shouts real loud, and the entire resident menagerie of apex predators recognize the sound of a problem well outside their weight class and collectively book it out of the way. Then a single strike of the Monkey King's staff splits the mountain down the middle and opens a nice easy route free and clear. And our heroes are stunned to see, shining beyond the mountain, an absolutely beautiful Buddhist monastery. In fact, it's none other than the Buddhist monastery, the Thunderclap Monastery. That's right, it's finally happening. After all these years, all these tribulations, all that effort, Tripitaka is beyond overjoyed to finally lay eyes on his ultimate destination. It's gorgeous, radiant with holy light, bustling with arhats and monks and nuns. It even says Thunderclap Monastery right on the sign. And there, beyond the ranks of assembled devotees, seated on his lotus throne and shining with holy light, is none other than the Buddha himself. Tripitaka's long, arduous journey has finally come to an end. There's just one problem. Sun doesn't buy it for a minute. See, he's been to the Thunderclap Monastery. Several times, even. He knows where it is, and it's not here. Plus, the sign's got some fine print. It's actually the small Thunderclap Monastery, and he's never heard of that and very much doubts that it's an accredited institution of any kind. The Buddha loudly scolds Sun for not bowing before him like his companions, but Sun's not about to bend the knee to peer pressure of all things, and he knows a trap when he smells one. And unfortunately, this is very much a trap. The illusion begins to dissolve, but one thing is very real. Whoever's impersonating the Buddha has their hands on a real sacred artifact, a pair of golden symbols, and when Sun goes on the attack, the symbols snap around him and seal him in, leaving the others to be quickly captured by the revealed army of demons that have crafted this careful facade. The golden symbols prove to be a serious problem. Sun can't break them, and he can't shapeshift out of them. Worse, they're actively trying to slowly melt him, and while he's historically proven himself to be extremely melting-proof, he doesn't really want to stress test that. Desperate to escape and save his comrades from being cooked and eaten, Sun starts summoning his numerous heavenly allies to try and figure out a fix. Unfortunately, none of them have any luck breaking the symbols from the outside either. The most one of them manages to accomplish is a golden dragon who drills the tiniest hole into the metal with their horn, but it doesn't give Sun any leeway to squeeze out and escape. Still, it's not fruitless, because this actually gives Sun an idea. He drills a very small hole into the dragon's horn, shrinks down as tiny as he can go, and wedges himself inside. When the dragon pries himself free and the symbols seal shut again, Sun is safely out of them. He immediately smashes the symbols to pieces, which is an understandable response, but does unfortunately wake up the Demon Lord and put the whole mountain on high alert. Sun and his heavenly buddies start absolutely booking it, but the Demon Lord manages to goad Sun into fighting him head-on instead. He hits him with a wager that if Sun can defeat him in single combat, he'll release all his friends. But if he can't, the Demon Lord will devour them all, then complete their pilgrimage for them and take all the enlightenment for himself. Which is definitely how enlightenment works. Sun, of course, cannot resist the invitation to have a big awesome fight scene, so he duels the demon, who doesn't have a particularly snappy name, so we'll just approximate and call him Eyebrow Guy. But after a lengthy and extremely radical exchange of blows, Eyebrow Guy decides he's done fighting fair and whips off his sash, which turns out to be some sort of magical cloth bag that proceeds to suck in Sun Wukong and the entire army of heavenly backup dancers. Eyebrow Guy has his minions decant the imprisoned crew one at a time to get them all safely tied up with the others, while he goes and throws himself a great big giant party to celebrate his extremely cool victory. Now, Sun has done this song and dance before. It's pretty clear that Eyebrow Guy has managed to steal some sacred artifacts with weird powers, and until Sun finds the true owner of that weird sash with the ability to control it, he won't be able to beat it. But he's still got options, like using his prodigious shapeshifting ability to effortlessly break himself out, followed by literally everybody else. The escape plan only goes awry when he tries to retrieve everyone's weapons and gear and accidentally raises the alarm again, escalating everything into a knockdown, drag-out brawl that ends when Eyebrow Guy busts out the sash again. Sun tries to warn the others, but in the end can only save himself before Eyebrow Guy recaptures everybody and puts them straight back on square one. Sun indulges in a minor breakdown about this before trying Plan B, going out and getting more help. He runs down a short list of various big-name demon quellers and their associates, but none of them can stand up to the sash any better than he could, and all this accomplishes is adding more captured gods to the growing pile in Eyebrow Guy's secret lair. Sun is about to break down completely when an unexpected vibe interrupts his dark and brooding present. Joy. Laughter. Mirth, even. Rocking up on a colorful cloud of mist and merriment is none other than Budai, the laughing Buddha himself. And wouldn't you know it, this whole situation Sun is struggling through is Budai's problem too. See, Eyebrow Guy is actually one of his disciples gone rogue. That sash he's been using to capture everybody is Budai's iconic cloth sack, which he'd really like to get back. And as befits a guy who's a bit of a jovial prankster, he and Sun concoct a scheme full of comedy hijinks to save the day. For step 1 of the master plan, Sun zips back to the lair of Eyebrow Guy and goads him into a chase. Eyebrow Guy pursues him relentlessly, but loses sight of him right when he arrives at a melon farm, curating a field full of perfectly ripe melons. Since it's been a long set of fight scenes, Eyebrow Guy's worked up a bit of a thirst, and he asks the farmer for the biggest, juiciest melon he's got. The happy farmer happily obliges, but unfortunately, that juicy melon is none other than the expertly disguised Sun Wukong himself, who once again defaults to his pro strat of it's easier to punch the guy's organs from inside the guy's organs. The fight is over before it's begun, as Eyebrow Guy surrenders and pleads for mercy from Budai, who retrieves the bag, but wonders where his precious golden symbols went. He and Sun head back to the cave to retrieve the fragments of the irreplaceable sacred artifact Sun busted up, and while Sun gets in a little rampaging and cleans the place out, Budai magically restores his symbols and returns to the heavens from whence he came. Sun frees the imprisoned gods as well as his traveling companions, and our heroes continue their journey westward. It's not long before they run into a pleasant mountain village where Tripitaka hopes to spend the night, but they quickly learn from a local old man that the village really isn't as pleasant as it seems. For one thing, they live downwind of a giant valley full of persimmon trees, which is nice and picturesque one week of the year and unimaginably disgusting the other 51, when all the persimmons fall into the valley and rot into a giant mass of stinking slime. And on top of that, they're also being haunted by a murder demon that keeps eating people. Sun initially diagnoses them with a community issue, since if they really cared about getting rid of a demon, they would just pool their funds and hire an exorcist, but the old man fires back that they did, and the guy they hired died, and then the villagers had to cover the cost of his funeral and pay off the exorcist's apprentice who threatened to sue them. And then they hired another exorcist, and that guy died too! Sun, of course, volunteers himself and Pigsy to be take 3, and insists on being paid only in snacks, which is a tremendous relief to the village's faltering GDP. It's not long before an ominous wind kicks up and the demon arrives, shrouded in darkness and eerily silent. Pigsy finds this very intimidating, but Sun points out during the battle that since the demon can't seem to talk, that implies it's still fairly underpowered and will need to flee at sunrise. Sure enough, it bolts, and our heroes chase it past the giant, disgusting valley of rotting persimmons and straight to its lair, which is pretty low property value as demon lairs go, since it's really just a hole in the ground. The demon reveals its true form, which turns out to be a giant red snake that has accumulated just enough demonic mojo to become big and shadowy and extra carnivorous, but has not yet leveled up enough to take on a humanoid form. It takes a little maneuvering to get it out of its hidey hole again, but it eventually makes the rookie mistake of eating Sun Wukong whole, which, unfortunately, just gives him access to all its most punchable organs again. The demon is defeated, and the boys return in triumph with the dead snake in tow. Now they just need to deal with the big stinky mountain in the way. Fortunately, Sun has an idea. Let Pigsy do it. But before he has a chance to get too butthurt, Sun explains to the villagers that they need to feed Pigsy as much food as they can possibly make, and that immediately brings Pigsy around on this plan, because for a task this daunting, he's gonna need to transform into his ultimate form, a truly enormous, kaiju-scale giant pig. The villagers start cooking up an enormous pile of food for him while he gets to work brute-forcing his way through 800 miles of stinky persimmon slime, successfully clearing the way for our heroes to once again continue their journey to the west. And so our heroes trek westward westward some more until they encounter a giant moated city known as the Scarlet Purple Kingdom. As usual, the boys immediately attract a crowd, but Tripitaka successfully keeps them behaving themselves until they reach a college of interpreters they can stay at. This place is well outside the Tang Empire's sphere of influence, so they don't have any diplomatic ground to stand on here, and Tripitaka heads off to talk to the local king about getting his travel rescript thingy stamped. But he quickly finds that the king has some other priorities he'd like to discuss first. See, he's heard tell that the Tang Emperor once came back to life after an illness, and he wanted to know exactly how that happened. Tripitaka explains that the way he heard it, the Emperor once had a dream in which he killed the Dragon King of the Jing River, and apparently that was real enough that the Dragon King filed suit about it from the underworld, causing the Emperor to waste away by heavenly decree. When he was on his deathbed, his chancellor wrote a letter for him to take with him when he died to show the judges of the underworld, and it was apparently so convincing that the judges sent the Emperor back to the land of the living with 20 more years in him. The king is very impressed and admits that his curiosity is less academic and more personal. See, he himself has been incurably sick for 3 whole years. At this very moment, Sun Wukong rolls up on the palace with an enormous entourage of citizens to elaborately declare that he is going to be the one to cure the king. See, he and Pigsy were out shopping when he spotted a publicly posted royal decree promising a handsome reward for anyone who could heal the king's lasting illness, and he just knew he had to be the one to take a crack at it. Tripitaka is very confused, since as far as he knows, none of his disciples have any medical training, least of all Sun. But that's fine, Sun is good at everything. How hard could this possibly be? Sun takes the king's pulse, rattles off a diagnosis of lonely bird disease, and when asked for a prescription, he tells the court doctors to just deliver him 2 pounds of every kind of medicine they have, and he'll figure it out from there. They tell Tripitaka that if Sun is successful, they'll happily recertify his travel rescript and send him on his way. But Tripitaka realizes that this implies if Sun fails, they won't do that, and he tells Sun he better know what he's doing because he just got socially finagled into a very annoying hostage situation. Sun is unbothered and heads off with his enormous stock of medicines to get to work. Pigsy assumes Sun's cunning plan is to abandon the quest and open up a local pharmacy, but Sun explains he only had them give him this truly ridiculous supply of medicine so they couldn't reverse engineer his proprietary medicine recipe from the ingredients. Then he picks out 2 laxatives, mixes in a dose of soot for color, and then sets out to acquire the secret, most important ingredient of them all, a rare and potent elixir known as horse piss. No, hear him out. Remember, their horse is actually a magical dragon horse whose piss therefore has innumerable magical qualities and is capable of curing all mortal diseases. However, when they go out to collect this precious liquid gold, the horse is very uncooperative. He transforms into a humanoid form to explain himself, and he tells them that he can't just piss like it's no big deal. They don't understand what they're asking for here. His heavenly piss is so magical that it can transform fish into dragons and ordinary grasses into divine agaric. This is powerful stuff, far too powerful to unleash on an unsuspecting world. He's been holding it in for literally thousands of miles. Sun respects his concerns, but explains that it's a matter of life and death. They need the dragon horse's magical piss to cure the king, or they might not be able to leave. The dragon horse recognizes the nobility of their quest and finally acquiesces to share. With the last and most precious ingredient acquired, Sun forms the prescription into pills he calls the elixir of black gold. The king downs all 3 of them, is promptly incapacitated with an absolutely monstrous case of the shits, and then wakes up feeling better than he has in years. In celebration of Sun Wukong's great accomplishment, the king throws a massive banquet for everyone. But as they're all celebrating, the king confides in Sun that his illness wasn't quite as mysterious as he framed it. He's known all along that it was actually caused by anxiety. Sun says that of course he already knew that, but what he didn't know was the cause of that anxiety. And the king explains that he's been morose and stressed ever since the abduction of his queen 3 years ago by a terrifying demon who calls himself Jupiter's rival. On top of that initial tragedy, ever since that day, the demon has regularly sent minions to abduct servant girls from the palace, keeping the king's grief and anxiety at a nice slow boil. As if on cue, one such demonic minion appears in a massive gust of wind, demanding 2 fresh servants, which Sun Wukong is not about and naturally starts throwing hands. He manages to snap the demon's lance in half, causing it to flee in terror, and Sun flies off after it to do what he does best. As he approaches the demon's mountain lair, he sees it briefly crowned by a massive explosion of smoke, fire, and sand, and he also notices a little courier demon sprinting down the road away from the mountain and towards the kingdom he just left. He decides to eavesdrop a little and hears the demon courier explaining to himself that the demon king is not going to stand for his minion being attacked like that, and the courier's been sent on his way right now to deliver a declaration of war on the Scarlet Purple Kingdom. And he also notes that even though the demon abducted the queen 3 years ago, he hasn't been able to do anything to her, which is a real bummer. Sun gets curious about that and drops down in disguise to ask a couple follow-up questions, and the courier helpfully explains that right after the queen got abducted, some immortal gave her a magical robe, and ever since she put it on, anyone who touches her feels like they're being stabbed by 10,000 on-fire needles. So Jupiter's rival may call her his queen, but he can't even lay a hand depend on her, which is why he keeps abducting all these servant girls instead. Sun makes a note of this, kills the courier, and zips back from his scouting mission to tell the king he's gonna need some kind of proof that he's actually on the king's side, because if he can't convince the queen that he's actually there to rescue her, he's not gonna be able to bring her back. He may be like quintuply immortal, but he's not immune to pain. The king loans him one of her favorite golden bracelets, and Sun heads back to the mountain for the demon fight portion of the ride. Having conveniently killed a bad guy recently, Sun opts to take his place and transforms into a copy of the courier, marches up to the lair of Jupiter's rival, and complains very loudly that when he brought that declaration of war, he absolutely got his ass beat by the very well-armed and extremely buff forces of the Scarlet Purple Kingdom. Jupiter's rival is unconcerned, since while they may have an army of powerful warriors with 8-packs and back abs, he has on his side the sacred treasures that caused that big explosion earlier. But he tells the courier to let the queen know her husband is coming for her, since even though his efforts are doomed, it might be fun to cheer her up a little before crushing her hopes entirely. Sun obligingly heads to the quarters of the queen, who is very beautiful but clearly very unhappy to be there, and thus very uninterested in being presentable or personable. He cheerfully explains to the queen that her husband is about to go to war, but he also had a special message just for her that he can't share with the other servants around. She dismisses them, and he immediately wipes off his disguise and tells her not to be scared. He's here to save her. He shows her the bracelet the king loaned him, and the two of them promptly get to work on planning her rescue. Fortunately, she knows a lot about Jupiter's rival and his weapons. She tells Sun that his most dangerous tool is a set of 3 golden bells that conjure fire, smoke, and toxic sand. He never takes them off, but Sun tells the queen that she is going to need to help him with that. She'll need to persuade the demon to give the bells to her. Sun heads back to Jupiter's rival and tells him he told the queen the king didn't want her anymore, and now that she's realized there's no hope of rescue, she's ready to make herself his consort once and for all. Jupiter's rival goes all cartoon wolf whistle about it, but of course, still can't actually touch the queen, so when she tells him she'd really believe he liked her if he showed her some real treasures, he's so desperate for the positive attention that he immediately strips off the golden bells and leaves them in her capable hands. Unfortunately, when Sun tries to sneak out with them, he gives them just a little bit of a jangle, causing a massive explosion and an immediate failure of the stealth mission. Sun manages to transform into a fly and hide while the demon's forces go on high alert, but the doors are sealed with him inside. He finds the queen in despair since she assumes her rescue has failed, but he very quietly explains to her that he's not dead, just a little stuck, and he's gonna need her to lure in the demon one more time so they can get the bells back and then both escape. And just to be sure it all works out smoothly, he'll take the form of one of her servants and stay with her the whole time. The queen once again calls in Jupiter's rival, this time to share a pleasant evening of consuming enormous amounts of alcohol. The queen plays a consummate host and a perfect consort, and once again Jupiter's rival is torn between getting exactly what he always wanted and the whole 10,000 horrible stabbing pains thing. While the demon is flustered, Sun decides to make his situation much worse by unleashing a sneaky horde of vicious stinging insects that crawl into the demon's clothes and make him look and feel like a very unhygienic boy. He's of course profoundly embarrassed to look like a slob in front of his queen, and in the process of disrobing, he hands the bells off to the nearest servant without even thinking about it. Sun immediately does the old duplicate and replace trick and returns the false bells to the queen's care no problem. With the situation defused and everyone ready to turn in for the night in chaste separate beds, Sun quietly excuses himself out the front door, then immediately turns around and smashes the door down to challenge the Demon King. A brawl, of course, follows. He and Jupiter's rival have a rad but inconclusive battle, but then the demon asks to be excused so he can go have some breakfast and definitely not retrieve his sacred OP treasure bells. Sun lets him go, and the demon retrieves the bells from the queen and heads back out for the true final battle. But when he busts out the bells, he's shocked to see that Sun is sporting a set just like his. Sun says they were probably forged at the same time as a matching set, and Jupiter's rival must have the male version while Sun has the female ones. The demon says it's ridiculous to gender inanimate objects, shakes the bells, finds that they do absolutely nothing, and concludes they must be having performance anxiety due to the presence of the girl bells. Sun in turn busts out his own actually functional bells and whips up a massive firestorm with them. You know, for the life of me, I cannot figure out what this metaphor could possibly be. So the demon is trapped in a maelstrom of fire, but just when it looks like he's about to be Jupiter's barbecue, who should appear in a burst of divine radiance but Kuan Yin? She sprinkles dew on the flames to put them out, and Sun bows and asks what she's doing here. She explains that, unfortunately, this demon is another one of her escaped sacred animal friends. This one, her golden wolf that she rides around on special occasions. And what he was doing here wasn't just some sort of self-serving ego trip like it might have appeared, it was, in fact, a perversion of heavenly law. See, many years ago, when the king of the Scarlet Purple Kingdom was just the crown prince, he was an avid hunter, and one day while he was out and about, he wounded 2 birds that turned out to be the offspring of Mahamayori, the great peacock king. She was outraged at the harming of her followers, and in retribution she decreed that the king would spend 3 years in yearning and heartache by being separated from his partner. Kuan Yin was in attendance when this decree was made, and so was the wolf, so clearly when he went rogue, he decided to take matters into his own hands and inflict the punishment himself. Sun points out that while he may have technically technically doled out a heaven-approved punishment, he was also absolutely awful to the completely innocent queen, not to mention countless other innocent women. So can he please just kill him a little bit, just this once? He promises not to make a habit of it. Kuan Yin tells Sun to just be content that he defeated him and can reunite the king and queen once and for all. Kuan Yin and her wolf leave, and Sun clears out the demon cave, rescuing the queen. The question of transport is a little bit dicey, since Sun can't exactly carry her, but he weaves a straw dragon for her to ride on and uses magic to fly them straight to the Scarlet Purple Kingdom. She's reunited with her king and they share a tearful embrace, and oopsies, the magical 10,000 on fire needles thing. Whoops. At this point, the immortal Zhang Baoduan appears to take credit for giving the queen the magical Don't Touch Me aura to ensure she'd be safe during her 3 years of separation from the king. Now that the magic has served its purpose, he retrieves the cloak and vanishes, leaving the happy couple truly reunited once and for all. With justice finally served and all right with the world, or at least with this part of it, our heroes are at last reunited and can finally continue their journey to the west. They've conquered the false promise of an early end to their story, but how many more adventures remain before our heroes finally reach the true Thunderclap Monastery? Creative problems require innovative solutions, but our pilgrims are getting more practice every day. New challenges wait to be conquered next time on Journey to the West.